Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today's is a good one. We are going to address giant jerkbaits. There is a time and a place where you want to throw big jerkbaits because it will not only potentially give you the shot at a personal best, there are times that they outperform regular sized jerkbaits. And I want to tell you a little bit of a background story on this, which kind of was an eye-opening experience for me. Years ago, I was fishing an FLW tour event on Kentucky Lake during the month of June. It was a straight up ledge bite. I was fishing the upstream side of an island head, of a submerged island head. It was myself, along with Jay Ellis, and a few other anglers that were coming and going. And there was one point Cody Meyer pulled up. This is back in the day when we had co-anglers. Cody Meyer pulled up, and we had all been catching some fish there. And Cody Meyer's co-angler pulled out a giant jerkbait and started to put on a clinic in front of us. He caught like a 7-pounder, a couple of 4-pounders, and it was right in the same area where we had all been fishing for a while, throwing traditional ledge baits, your crankbaits, your spoons, dragon baits, throwing swim baits, traditional ledge stuff. But when he pulled up and threw the jerk bait, he caught several really big fish in front of us, to the point where I remember talking with Jay Ellis after the fact, being like, I don't even have any big jerk baits with me. I had some standard sized jerk baits, but I didn't have any of the big ones that this guy was throwing. So since then, and seeing that eye-opening experience where the jerkbait was drawing fish, from 15 to 20 feet of water coming up to hit his jerkbait suspended higher up in the water column, and seeing the giant sized fish that he was catching compared to most of the 2 to 2.5 pounders the rest of us were catching, it was an eye-opening experience. So since then, and this was probably back in like 2012, 2013, I don't remember what year, but since then, I've really experimented quite a bit with big jerk baits. And I've got two that I've really kind of narrowed it down to that I like at this point. One is the Megabass Canada, and then the other is the original F18 floating Rapala. But what I got to tell you with this, I don't fish it just as a floating bait. I actually drill a bunch of holes in it and pour lead into it to get it to slowly sink or suspend. I've got a whole bunch of these, and I've gotten to the point where, I carry piles of these big jerk baits. This is the Canada. You can see that, these have a lot of war wounds on them, and I've caught a lot of really nice fish on them. And at this point, I've kind of got very specific times when I like to throw these big jerk baits. And when I say they're giant, they're giant in jerk bait standards. These are 7-inch jerk baits compared to what is roughly about a 4.5-inch standard size jerk bait. If you're talking about like the Vision 110s or the Stunnas, that's kind of the standard size. So when you compare these, as a 7-inch bait with a much deeper body, it really is a bigger size bait. The other one that I like too is there's some Lucky Craft pointers that are very large. But there's a time and a place for these. Now, I don't necessarily think you're always going to outshine by throwing a big Canada or a big F18 Rapala, but the key to it is you got to know when. So the first is actually kind of going against the norm. And this is when your jerkbait bite is on fire, meaning when the jerkbait is the best bait going, you're catching a pile of fish. That's one time it's worth putting down your standard size jerkbaits and picking up one of these big guys. And the reason for that is the conditions are perfect for the jerkbait. So if you pick up a larger size jerkbait, what you're going to do is weed out some of those smaller fish and increase your chances at some of those really big fish. So if your jerkbait bite is on fire, do not be afraid to pick up a big jerkbait and go to town. It's really the ideal time because you already know the jerkbait is the key bait to be using when it's already on fire. So don't be afraid to go with a bigger one at that point. Another time I like to throw these big ones is when you're talking about fishing in some of the coldest water of the year. Now, you're not going to generate nearly as many bites, but your average size fish, again, is going to be good. When you're talking about the coldest water of the year, the fish's metabolism at that time is at its slowest point, and the fish are going to be looking at trying to get one meal to last longer periods of time. So a lot of times they're more willing to eat a larger bait that's presented in front of them when their metabolism is super slow, which is when the water's at the coolest point of the year. And again, when you're talking about cold water periods, that's when you do get a lot of your shad die offs. So these bigger baits do a really good job at mimicking some of your larger sized, gizzard shad, some of your herring, things like that. And the fish are going to be keying in on that in that cold water periods. So an easy meal like a jerkbait, a bigger one, gives a fish the opportunity to eat less and therefore expel less energy. So during cold water periods is another time that you're going to want to think about throwing one. I've also found that with this forward-facing sonar, uh, having a bigger profile jerkbait is a really good benefit as well because it shows up better on your screen. You can cast them a lot farther and you can get them down, generally speaking, a little bit deeper. So if you happen to be fishing for some fish that you're seeing on forward-facing sonar, don't be afraid to go with a bigger jerkbait. One of the keys to that too is you can see how the fish respond to a bigger jerkbait. So pretty quickly you can determine whether or not they actually prefer the bigger jerkbait versus the regular standard size jerkbait. So in that case, it's a good bait to pick up, throw at a couple of fish, see how they respond, and then make your decision based off of that. Another key with that, and this kind of goes along with the forward facing sonar, but we've found that jerkbaits lately have been really good to fish through standing timber. And a lot of that's based on the forward facing sonar because now we're kind of out fishing a lot of that stuff. But one key when fishing standing timber is a lot of times those fish are suspended a little bit deeper because you might be over 40, 50 foot of water. And the reality is a bigger profiled bait has more drawing power, meaning if the fish is down 20 feet and you're getting this down 6 to 8 feet, at that point, a bigger profiled bait is easier for that fish to track from further away. So it's got more drawing power. So if you're trying to bring fish from a longer distance, going with a larger size jerkbait is a good time to do it. Again, if you're using forward facing sonar, one of the good things about that is you can actually determine how the fish is responding. So if you get a lot of fish that are coming up to the bigger jerkbait and turning away, you might want to put it down. But if you're drawing them from further away, you're seeing them come from deeper water for a bigger jerkbait, that's a good time to continue to throw the bigger jerkbaits because you know it's got more drawing power at that time. Obviously, another time that I love to throw a big jerkbait is when I'm fishing a body of water that's known for producing big fish. I've had outstanding days on Gunnersville with this. I've had outstanding days on Lake Chickamauga with it. Sam Rayburn, I have had some outstanding days on a big floating, well, it's the F-18 that I've changed into a suspending Rapala. Lake Seminole, I've done some good days there fishing around standing timber. The point being that if you're fishing a body of water that's known for producing big bass, those fish are accustomed to eating 7-inch shad, and therefore you're actually doing a really good job at mimicking the forage of those bigger fish. So don't be afraid to go with a bigger bait on a big fish lake. Lastly, the last time where I'll really consider throwing a big jerkbait with a bigger profile is when I'm fishing off-colored water. So a lot of times people don't generally want to throw a jerkbait when fishing stained water or even muddy water because a jerkbait is considered a visual bait. It's more of a clear water bait. In the case of a bigger profiled bait, if you're talking about fishing off-colored water, all that's going to do is help the fish track it. So it's a great bait to consider throwing when you're talking about your cold water periods. You're generally that same time of year where a jerkbait shines, but if you've got a little bit of watercolor, don't be afraid to go with the bigger profile bait because it helps those fish track it. So there's a lot of really opportune times to going with a much larger profile jerkbait. It really can make a big difference and you can catch some absolute giants with these things. So don't be afraid to do it. If you have not thrown some of these giant jerk baits, I highly recommend getting yourself one or two and just going to town with it. Like put them to the best thing to do is when that jerk bait bite is on fire, switch to a big one and see how big the fish are you're going to catch compared to the standard average size you catch on a basic jerk bait. It's a fun bait to throw. You catch big ones on it, and there really are some periods where it outshines a traditionally sized jerk bait. So hopefully this was helpful. If you guys out there have some jerk baits that you love to throw that are larger than the average size, share that in the comment section as well so that the rest of the viewers can see which ones you guys like too, because I think that's a big help. Otherwise, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned for another video coming out tomorrow.